You know that moment when you realize the people you've welcomed into your life see you as nothing more than a convenience? I'm standing in my own bedroom, the bedroom I've occupied for 37 years, and my daughter-in-law is telling me I need to move into the basement. Not asking, telling. I'm Vivian Hartford, and this is the story of how I went from being treated like a burden in my own home to reclaiming everything I'd built. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Before we dive in, I'd love to know, where are you watching from today? Drop your city in the comments. There's something comforting about knowing we're all connected, sharing our stories across this vast country of ours. Now let me take you back to that Tuesday afternoon in September, here in my Portland home. The maple trees outside were just beginning to turn, splashing the neighborhood with gold and crimson. I was folding laundry, my laundry, in my bedroom, when Cassandra swept in without knocking. "Vivian, we need to talk," she announced, not bothering with pleasantries. My son Michael trailed behind her, avoiding my eyes. That should have been my first clue. "Richard's parents are coming for Thanksgiving, and they'll need to stay through Christmas," Cassandra continued, already opening my closet and assessing my belongings with the cool efficiency of an auctioneer. "They can't do stairs anymore, so we'll need this room. The basement has that nice daybed, and you're still mobile enough to handle the steps." Still mobile enough? I'm 68 years old, not ancient. I swim 3 times a week at the community center. I volunteer at the library. I have a better social life than most people half my age. "This is my room," I said quietly, my hand still clutching one of my silk blouses. "This is my house." Cassandra's laugh was sharp, dismissive. "Technically, yes, but Michael and I have been paying the utilities and maintenance for 3 years now. We've essentially been supporting you. The least you can do is be flexible when we have actual guests coming." Actual guests? As if I were something less than that. As if I were a tenant who'd overstayed her welcome in the home I'd purchased with my late husband 42 years ago. Michael finally spoke up, his voice weak. "Mom, it's just for a couple of months. Cassandra's parents really can't manage stairs. You understand, right?" I looked at my son, my only child, the boy I'd raised alone after his father died when he was 12. The young man I'd put through college by working double shifts at the hospital where I'd been a nurse supervisor. The groom whose wedding I'd paid for when he'd temporarily run into financial trouble. The father who'd moved into my home 5 years ago when he'd lost his job, promising it would only be until he got back on his feet. I looked at him, and I saw a stranger. "When do you need me out?" I asked. "This weekend would be ideal," Cassandra said, already texting on her phone. "Richard's parents are arriving Monday, and I'll need time to redecorate. This wallpaper is so dated." That wallpaper had been chosen by my husband. We'd hung it together during a rare weekend off, laughing as we got more paste on ourselves than the walls. I spent that evening packing my belongings in a daze. 42 years of memories compressed into boxes and suitcases. My wedding photo with James, the baby book documenting Michael's first steps, first words, first day of school, the nursing award I'd received after 35 years of service, all of it relegated to the basement like forgotten storage. The basement wasn't terrible, I'll give them that. Michael had finished it years ago, before Cassandra, before his priorities shifted. There was decent carpet, adequate lighting, and yes, a daybed pushed against the far wall. But it smelled of mildew and old cardboard, and the single small window sat at ground level, offering me a view of feet passing by on the sidewalk. This was my home, the home where I'd raised my son. The home I'd fought to keep during the lean years. The home where my husband and I had dreamed of growing old together before cancer stole him away at 47. Saturday morning, Michael helped me carry boxes down the narrow stairs. He wouldn't meet my eyes. Cassandra supervised from the top step, offering helpful suggestions about space optimization. When we finished, she immediately headed to what had been my bedroom. I could hear her on the phone, scheduling painters. "Mom," Michael started, pausing at the basement door. "I'm sorry it has to be this way, but..." "But what?" I interrupted, finally finding my voice. But your wife's comfort matters more than your mother's dignity? But I'm supposed to be grateful you're allowing me to stay in my own house? That's not fair. We've been helping you financially." "Helping me?" The laugh that escaped my throat surprised even me. "Michael, do you have any idea what this house is worth? What my retirement accounts hold? What arrangements I've made?" He looked genuinely puzzled. Of course he did. He'd never asked. He'd simply assumed that his aging mother needed rescue, needed management, needed to be shuffled aside when convenient. "You never talk about money," he said defensively. "You never asked," I replied. "You just assumed. You assumed I was a burden. You assumed this house was somehow yours to reorganize. You assumed wrong." I closed the basement door before he could respond. My hands were shaking, not from weakness but from rage, pure, clarifying rage. That night, alone in the basement with my boxes, I made myself a cup of tea and did something I hadn't done in years. I opened my safe deposit box records. I reviewed my investment portfolio. I examined the property deeds I'd kept locked away since James died. Most people saw me as simply Vivian Hartford, retired nurse, widow, grandmother to Michael and Cassandra's 2 children, but I was also Vivian Hartford, daughter of a shrewd real estate investor who'd taught me everything he knew. Vivian Hartford, who'd taken the life insurance money from James's death and through tears and determination turned it into something substantial. Vivian Hartford, who owned not just this house, but the downtown penthouse property that Michael and Cassandra had oohed and awed over during a charity event last year, never knowing who held the deed. I smiled for the first time in days. They wanted me out of the way? They'd get their wish, just not in the way they imagined. Sunday afternoon, I drove to the Cascade Tower downtown, 23 stories of glass and steel overlooking the Willamette River. James and I had purchased the penthouse unit as an investment 30 years ago, when the building was first constructed. We'd planned to retire there someday, to simplify our lives and enjoy the city views. After he died, I couldn't bear to sell it. Instead, I'd kept it, renting it out to carefully vetted tenants, using the income to supplement my retirement and, ironically, to help Michael during his various financial crises. The current tenant's lease had expired last month, and I'd been interviewing new prospects. But as I rode the elevator to the 23rd floor, a different plan crystallized. The penthouse was exactly as I remembered. Floor-to-ceiling windows framing Mount Hood in the distance, gleaming hardwood floors, a chef's kitchen with marble countertops, 2 bedrooms, 2.5 baths, and a wraparound balcony that caught both sunrise and sunset. Nearly 2,000 square feet of luxury that I owned outright. I walked through each room slowly, my footsteps echoing in the empty space. In the master bedroom, I stood at the window and looked down at the city below. Somewhere out there was my house, my original house, where I was currently relegated to the basement while my son and daughter-in-law played lord and lady of the manor. The irony was exquisite. Just last Christmas, at the charity gala where Michael worked as an accountant for one of the sponsors, Cassandra had dragged us all to view this very building. She'd pressed her face against the lobby windows like a child at a candy store, going on and on about how someday they'd own a place like this, how it represented real success. Michael had laughed it off, saying they were years away from that level. Cassandra had pouted, shooting me a look that suggested I was somehow part of what held them back. If only they knew, if only they'd bothered to ask about my life, my finances, my plans. But they'd never been interested in who I was beyond mom and grandma, the supporting character in their life story, useful for babysitting and convenient to blame for their own shortcomings. I pulled out my phone and called my property manager, Gerald Chen. We'd worked together for 15 years, and I trusted him implicitly. "Gerald, it's Vivian Hartford, the Cascade Tower, penthouse. I'm taking it off the rental market. I'll be moving in myself." There was a pause. "Is everything all right, Mrs. Hartford?" "Everything is about to be perfect," I assured him. I'll need the utilities transferred to my name by tomorrow, and I'll need recommendations for movers who can work quickly and discreetly. Of course. When are you thinking? This week, Wednesday at the latest. Another pause. That's quite sudden. Gerald, I'm 68 years old and have been sleeping in a basement for the last 2 nights. Sudden is exactly what's called for. He chuckled. Understood. I'll send you a list of movers within the hour. And Mrs. Hartford, welcome home. Welcome home. Yes, this would be home now. My real home. The one I'd earned, the one I'd paid for, the one that no ungrateful child could take from me. The movers arrived at 6:30 Wednesday morning. I'd chosen that time deliberately. Michael left for work at 6:45, and Cassandra didn't emerge from the master bedroom before 9:30 on her best days. I'd been awake since 4, my belongings already organized and labeled with the efficiency of someone who'd spent decades managing hospital wards. Everything goes, I told the crew chief quietly, gesturing to my boxes in the basement. And please, discretion is important. He nodded knowingly. He'd probably seen this scenario before. Seniors being shuffled around by their children, finally reclaiming their independence. The crew moved with practiced efficiency, carrying my life up those basement stairs and into the truck parked discreetly down the block. I was supervising the loading of my grandmother's antique dresser when Michael appeared at the top of the basement stairs, coffee mug in hand, still in his pajamas. Mom, what's going on? Why are there movers here? I climbed the stairs to meet him at eye level. I'm moving out. His face went through several expressions, confusion, disbelief, then something that might have been panic. Moving out? What are you talking about? Where would you go? That's not really your concern anymore, is it? Cassandra appeared behind him, her silk robe fluttering. What's all this noise? Vivian, what are you doing? I'm leaving, I said simply. You needed my room, so I'm making it permanently available. But you can't just leave, Michael stammered. This is your house. We were just moving you temporarily. No, I interrupted firmly. You were putting me in the basement indefinitely because it was convenient for you. You made me feel like a burden in my own home, so I'm relieving you of that burden. Cassandra's expression shifted from confusion to something harder. Where exactly do you think you're going? Do you even have the resources to rent somewhere decent? Michael and I have been supporting me? I couldn't help but laugh. Cassandra, you've been living in my house, rent-free, for 5 years. The utilities you've been paying don't begin to cover market rent for a 4-bedroom home in this neighborhood. But let's not argue about math. The crew chief appeared at my elbow. Mrs. Hartford, we're loaded up. Ready when you are. Mrs. Hartford? Michael's voice cracked. Why is he calling you that? Mom, please, let's talk about this. Don't make any rash decisions. I looked at my son. Really looked at him. When had he become so small? Or had I simply been making myself smaller to accommodate his ego? Michael, I've spent 3 days in a basement considering my decisions. There's nothing rash about this. I'm choosing to live somewhere I'm wanted and respected. Somewhere I'm not just convenient or in the way. But Mom, we need you. Who'll watch the kids when... And there it was. Not we'll miss you or we love you. Just who'll watch the kids. You'll figure it out, I said, following the movers toward the door. You're both resourceful adults. You'll manage. Behind me, I heard Cassandra hiss to Michael. Let her go. She'll be back in a week when reality hits. I smiled. Reality was about to hit, all right. Just not the person she expected. The penthouse felt like breathing after being underwater. I stood on the balcony that first afternoon, watching the city wake up below me, and felt something I hadn't experienced in years. Peace. Pure, uncomplicated peace. My furniture looked magnificent in the space. The antique dresser my grandmother had brought from Boston fit perfectly in the master bedroom. My reading chair, the one James had given me for our 20th anniversary, sat by the window where the light would be perfect for my books. Even my plants, rescued from various corners of the basement, seemed to straighten up in the abundant natural light. Gerald had arranged for a cleaning service to come that first day, and by evening, the penthouse looked like I'd lived there for years. I made myself dinner in the gorgeous kitchen, just a simple pasta, but cooking it felt ceremonial somehow. I ate on the balcony, watching the sun set over the West Hills, painting the sky in shades of orange and gold. My phone had been ringing all day. Michael had called 17 times, Cassandra, 6. I'd ignored them all, let them wonder, let them worry, let them feel a fraction of the uncertainty they'd caused me. Finally, around 8 o'clock, I answered. "Mom, thank God, where are you? Are you safe?" "I'm perfectly safe, Michael. I'm in my home." "Your home? What do you mean? Did you rent an apartment?" "Mom, please, you need to think about this financially. You can't afford—" "Michael," I interrupted calmly, "I need you to stop talking and start listening. Can you do that?" Silence on the other end. Then cautiously, "Okay. I'm not in financial trouble. I've never been in financial trouble. I have a substantial retirement portfolio, excellent health insurance, and multiple income streams. The help you thought you were providing, I didn't need it. I accepted it because I thought it made you feel good to help your mother. But you never said, you never asked. You simply assumed. You assumed I was failing, struggling, barely scraping by. You saw what you wanted to see. A helpless old woman who should be grateful for your charity and willing to accept whatever scraps of dignity you chose to offer." I could hear Cassandra in the background, demanding to know what I was saying. "I'm not telling you where I am," I continued. "Not yet. I need time to settle in, to remember who I am without constantly trying to make myself smaller, quieter, less of an inconvenience. When I'm ready, we can talk about our relationship." "But Michael?" I paused, looking out at the glittering cityscape. "It will be on my terms, not yours, not Cassandra's. Mine. Mom, please. I love you. I've always loved you, but I won't be treated like a burden anymore. Think about that." I hung up before he could respond and turned off my phone. Tomorrow, I'd deal with the logistics, changing my address, updating my information with my doctors, transferring my pharmacy prescriptions. Tonight, I would simply exist in this beautiful space I'd reclaimed, remembering what it felt like to take up room in the world without apologizing for it. The city lights twinkled below like a constellation of possibilities. I was home. Finally, truly home. By Friday, reality began to set in for Michael and Cassandra. I knew this because my friend Dorothy, bless her, had remained in contact with them, playing the role of concerned neighbor while keeping me updated on the chaos unfolding in what used to be my house. "Vivian, you should hear them," Dorothy reported during our coffee date at a downtown cafe I'd never visited before, too far from my old neighborhood. "Cassandra's completely beside herself. She's been calling everyone she knows, trying to figure out where you went, and Michael looks like he hasn't slept in days." "Good," I said, surprising myself with the venom in my voice. Then softer, "I know that sounds harsh. Honey, it sounds like justice." Dorothy squeezed my hand. "What they did was unconscionable. Moving you to the basement like you were storage furniture." I'd known Dorothy for 30 years. We'd worked together at the hospital, survived countless double shifts and impossible cases. She was one of the few people who knew the full story of my finances, my properties, my carefully constructed life. "There's more," Dorothy continued, lowering her voice conspiratorially. "Apparently, Cassandra's parents arrived Monday as planned, and according to my source, she meant her daughter, who was friends with a neighbor. Richard's mother took one look at your old room and declared it completely unacceptable." I raised my eyebrows. "Unacceptable?" "The wallpaper Cassandra was so eager to remove. Turns out Richard's mother is extremely allergic to the paint fumes from the new color they chose. She lasted one night before demanding they book her a hotel. She's apparently quite angry they didn't prepare better." I couldn't help it. I laughed. A real, genuine laugh that drew looks from other cafe patrons. So they displaced me for nothing. It gets better. The hotel is costing them about $200 a night for 2 months. And you know they don't have that kind of cushion in their budget. I did know. I knew exactly what Michael earned as an accountant, knew about the credit card debt Cassandra had accumulated, knew about the car payments they were struggling with. I knew because I'd been helping, quietly transferring money for emergencies, paying for the grandchildren's private school tuition, covering home repairs they couldn't afford, all while they treated me like a charity case they were generously supporting. Michael called me yesterday, Dorothy continued, asked if I knew where you were. He sounded desperate, Vivian. I think it's starting to dawn on him what he's lost. What he threw away, I corrected. I didn't leave, Dorothy. I was pushed out. I know, honey, I know. We sat in comfortable silence for a moment, watching Portland's downtown bustle past the cafe windows. This was my city now, not the quiet residential neighborhood where I'd raised my family, but this vibrant, complicated, beautiful urban center. I was reinventing myself at 68, and it felt terrifying and exhilarating in equal measure. They'll figure out where you are eventually, Dorothy warned. Portland's not that big. I know, I agreed. But by then, I'll be ready for them. By then, they'll understand exactly what they've lost. And if you've been following along and want to see how this unfolds, please consider subscribing. Stories like mine need to be heard. Stories of women who refuse to be diminished, who reclaim their power no matter their age. The confrontation came 3 weeks later, on a Tuesday afternoon. I should have expected it, really. Michael had always been persistent when he wanted something, even as a child. I was in my building's lobby collecting a package from the concierge when I heard my name being called. Michael stood at the entrance, looking haggard. Cassandra was with him, her face a mask of barely controlled fury. "We need to talk," Michael said, approaching me. "Now." The concierge, Thomas, glanced at me questioningly. I gave him a subtle nod. It was fine. This confrontation was inevitable. "How did you find me?" I asked calmly, making no move to invite them upstairs. "It took weeks of searching," Cassandra spat. "Do you have any idea what you've put us through? Just disappearing like that, no consideration for how worried we've been." "Worried about me or worried about your situation?" I asked. Michael flinched. "Mom, please, can we go somewhere private? We need to discuss things." "Discuss what exactly?" "Your living situation." He gestured vaguely at the building around us. "This place. Mom, whatever you're paying in rent here, it's not sustainable. We've done the math. On your nursing retirement alone, there's no way you can afford—" "You've done the math," I repeated slowly. "On my finances, without asking me." "Someone needs to be realistic," Cassandra interjected. "You're not thinking clearly. Moving out like that, burning bridges with your family, draining your savings on some luxury apartment." "Who told you this was a rental?" I asked. They both blinked at me. "I assumed," Michael started. "You assumed, again." I shook my head. "Michael, Cassandra, I think it's time you both understood something. I don't rent this penthouse. I own it." The silence that followed was exquisite. "You... what?" Michael's face went pale. "I own it. Have owned it for 30 years. Your father and I bought it as an investment when this building was first constructed. I've been renting it out since he died, using the income to supplement my retirement." I paused, letting that sink in. "Income I've been using partially to help you both, actually. Those emergency funds you've needed over the years, many of them came from this property." Cassandra's mouth opened and closed like a fish. "That's impossible. You're a retired nurse. You couldn't possibly—" "I couldn't possibly what? Be financially savvy? Make smart investments? Have a life and assets beyond what you bothered to notice?" My voice remained level, but steel ran through it. "You assumed I was barely getting by because that fit your narrative. It made you feel noble, taking me in, helping me. It never occurred to you to actually ask about my situation. Mom, if you had this much money, why were you living in our house?" Michael's voice cracked. "Why did you let us think—" "Your house?" I interrupted sharply. "Michael, whose name is on the deed of that house?" His face went from pale to gray. Yours, but I thought, eventually, I said you could stay while you got back on your feet. 5 years ago. Your feet seem permanently planted now. We moved to a coffee shop down the block, neutral ground, public enough to prevent a complete scene. Michael and Cassandra sat across from me, their faces cycling through shock, disbelief, and dawning horror as the full picture emerged. "Let me lay this out clearly," I said, stirring my coffee with deliberate calm. "The house you've been living in rent-free for 5 years. It's worth approximately $800,000 in today's market. The utilities and maintenance you've been paying amount to about $500 a month. Market rent for a house that size in that neighborhood would be approximately $3,000 per month." Michael's jaw clenched. "We didn't know you were keeping track." "Of course you didn't know. You never asked. You never wondered. You just assumed dear old Mom was so grateful for your help that she wouldn't dare question the arrangement." I pulled out my phone and opened my banking app. "This penthouse? Worth approximately $1.2 million. Paid off. No mortgage. This is not my only property, by the way." Cassandra's eyes widened. "What?" "I own a small rental property near Reed College. 3 units, fully occupied. I own commercial space in the Pearl District, leased to a boutique that pays handsomely. I have a diversified investment portfolio that my father helped me set up 40 years ago and that I've managed carefully since. My retirement isn't just a nursing pension. It's the result of decades of smart financial planning." "Then why?" Michael's voice was barely a whisper. "Why did you live so simply? Why did you let us think—" "Because I didn't want money to define my relationships. I wanted to know my son loved me for who I was, not what I had. I wanted to spend time with my grandchildren because you wanted me there, not because I was a convenient, free babysitter. I wanted to be treated with respect and dignity because I'd earned it through being a good mother and grandmother, not because I held the purse strings." Tears were rolling down Michael's face now. "Mom, I'm so sorry. You didn't mean to treat me like a burden? You didn't mean to exile me to the basement in my own house? You didn't mean to dismiss my feelings, my dignity, my right to comfort in the home I built?" My voice cracked despite my attempts at control. "Michael, what did you mean then?" Cassandra had gone very quiet, her face pale. She was, I realized, doing calculations in her head, figuring out exactly how much they'd lost. "What happens now?" Michael asked finally. "With the house?" "That depends," I said, "on whether you're asking because you care about me or because you're worried about losing your free ride." "That's not fair." "Fair?" I set my coffee down carefully. "Let me tell you about fair, Michael. Fair would have been asking me what I wanted before deciding to move me to the basement. Fair would have been considering my feelings before treating me like furniture to be rearranged. Fair would have been respecting me enough to have an honest conversation about finances, expectations, and our living arrangement. We want to make this right," Michael said desperately. "Please, Mom, tell us how to make this right." I looked at my son, really looked at him, for the first time since this began. I saw the boy who'd held my hand at his father's funeral, trying to be brave. I saw the young man who'd called me first when he got accepted to college, his voice bright with excitement. I saw the father who'd wept with joy when his first child was born. But I also saw the man who'd let his wife dictate how his mother should be treated, who'd stood by while I was relegated to the basement, who'd prioritized appearances and comfort over love and respect. "Here's what's going to happen," I said finally. "You and Cassandra have 60 days to find new accommodations. I'm putting the house on the market." Cassandra gasped. "You can't." "I absolutely can. It's my house. It's always been my house. The only reason I haven't sold it before now is because I thought we were building something as a family. I was wrong. Mom, please, we have the kids to think about, their schools, their friends. You should have thought about that before treating their grandmother like an inconvenience." I kept my voice steady. 60 days is generous. It gives you time to find something suitable and gives me time to prepare the house for sale. I've already spoken to a real estate agent. This was partially true. I'd made preliminary calls, at least. What about our relationship? Michael asked, his voice breaking. What about the grandkids? Are you just cutting us out of your life? And there it was, the question I'd been wrestling with for 3 weeks, alone in my beautiful penthouse, watching the city lights and wondering if I was doing the right thing. I don't want to cut you out, I admitted, my own voice softening. Michael, you're my son. Those children are my grandchildren. I love you all. But love doesn't mean accepting mistreatment. It doesn't mean making myself small so you can feel big. It doesn't mean pretending everything is fine when it's not. So what do you want? Cassandra asked, her voice tight. I want honesty. I want respect. I want to be treated like a person with agency and dignity, not like a problem to be managed. I leaned forward, and I want an apology that means something. Not, I'm sorry you're upset, but I'm sorry I hurt you. I was wrong. Michael was crying openly now. I was wrong. God, Mom, I was so wrong. I got comfortable in that house, in that life, and I stopped seeing you as a person with needs and feelings. I just saw you as Mom. Always there, always supportive, never needing anything herself. That's the thing about mothers, I said quietly. We spend so long being what everyone needs that people forget we need things too. We need respect. We need consideration. We need to know we matter beyond what we can provide. Cassandra was silent, her face unreadable. Finally, she spoke. I've been horrible to you. I treated you like you were in the way, like the house was ours and you were just there on our generosity. She swallowed hard. I'm ashamed of myself. It wasn't enough, not yet, but it was a start. 3 months later, I stood in my penthouse, coffee in hand, watching the sunrise paint Mount Hood in shades of pink and gold. The house had sold quickly, above asking price. Michael and Cassandra had found a 3-bedroom rental in Beaverton, closer to their kids' schools and firmly within their actual budget. We were rebuilding, slowly, carefully. Michael came by every Sunday morning now, just the two of us, for coffee on my balcony. We talked about real things, his struggles with work, his fears about money, his realization that he'd been living beyond his means and expecting me to be the safety net. He was in therapy now, working through his relationship with both money and masculinity, unpacking why he'd needed to feel like the provider even when he wasn't. Cassandra's apology had taken longer and had been harder won. She'd grown up poor, she finally admitted, and the house, my house, had represented a security she'd never had. Taking control of it, of me, had been her way of feeling powerful. It didn't excuse her behavior, but it helped me understand it. The grandchildren visited every other Wednesday after school. I'd pick them up, and we'd bake cookies or work on art projects, and I'd tell them stories about their grandfather, about their father as a boy, about the strength it takes to set boundaries even with people you love. Dorothy had been right all those weeks ago in the cafe. This was justice. Not the vengeful kind that burns everything down, but the kind that rebuilds on a foundation of honesty and respect. I'd used part of the house sale proceeds to set up education trusts for my grandchildren, funds they'd access for college, fully protected, no strings attached. Michael and Cassandra would never control those funds, but they'd know their children were cared for. The rest I'd invested, diversified, secured for my own future. Because here's what I'd learned, what I want everyone listening to understand. You can love someone completely and still refuse to let them diminish you. You can be generous without being a doormat. You can be a mother, a grandmother, a helper, and still maintain your dignity, your agency, your sense of self. My father once told me that real wealth isn't about the money you have. It's about the choices that money allows you to make. For years, I'd made the choice to prioritize my son's comfort over my own. That wasn't wrong exactly, but it had become unbalanced, unsustainable. Now at 68, I was learning to take up space again, to live in the light instead of the basement, both literally and figuratively, to remember that I'd built something meaningful not just for others, but for myself. The city hummed below me, full of other people's stories, other people's reckonings and revelations. I was just one woman in one penthouse, but my story mattered. Your story matters. The moment you decide you deserve better, that's when everything changes. I'd been told to move into the basement. Instead, I'd moved into the life I'd always deserved, and that, ultimately, was the best revenge of all.